Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Litton. I'm a personal trainer in Tucson, Arizona, and have been so for over 25 years. Thank you so much for joining me today for this workout. I'm super excited and really want to give you some solid content. Before we get started, let me just kind of give you a rundown of what you can anticipate today. So we're going to start out initially with just some basics on posture, looking at setup and how that relates to just overall function and it's going to continue through the workout. After that, we're going to get into a warm-up. I'm going to teach you a particular exercise. Today's exercise of choice is going to be a squat. And then finally, we're going to finish up with some ending thoughts, some ways to consider motivation as you go into the rest of your day today. All right, so with that in mind, let's get started. First, we want to talk about that postural setup. So when we say postural setup, ultimately what we're speaking to is how we stand. So it starts with the feet. You're always going to look from the ground up. So take a look at my feet, follow along with me. First thing I'm going to have you do is look to see that your feet are pointed straight ahead. Once you recognize that, then we want to talk about something within your shoes, your feet, called the tripod. The tripod is the connecting points between your heel, the pad behind your big toe, and the pad behind your little toe. I'm using my hand as my foot to give you that example. So behind the big toe, behind the little toe, and the heel of your foot. So let's just take a little moment to feel that on both sides. Very good. Now once you have that organized, the next thing that we want to look at are the knees. Are your knees turned in? Are they turned out? Or are they pointing straight ahead like two headlights? If they're pointing ahead like two headlights, perfect, that's what we want. Continue to hold on to that. As we continue on up from there, now we're going to look at the hips. With the hips, I'm going to turn sideways because what we want to also take into consideration is what's going on with your hips in this motion. If you think about your hips as a bowl of water, it's a great visual because if I have a bowl full of water and I do this, what's going to happen? Right? Exactly. I'm going to spill that water forward. Whereas if I tuck heavily this way, I'm going to spill that water backward. So when we're talking postural setup, we want to find that middle ground where that water is nice and level, nice and happy, okay? So I'm going to face you again. We have the feet, we have the knees, now we have the hips. One of my clients today was actually talking about her huzu. It was a reference to something way back in a summer camp somewhere. She's now in her 70s. But the huzu, your buttocks, get that squeeze on your buttocks to get the bowl nice and level. Once that occurs, you're going to start to recognize some light sensation in your abdomen because you're engaging some of your deeper stabilizing muscles in your abdomen. That's a good thing. From there, we want to recognize with that involvement and that attentiveness, where are your ribs? If you've adjusted your hips well and you have that bowl nice and level, your ribs are going to be flat. They're going to be smooth. So if they're not, make sure you revisit your hips. From there, we're going to check the shoulders. At this point, if we've situated ourselves well here, the shoulders are just going to fall happily into place. Your arms are going to be at your side. So that's the first part of today's workout, postural setup. Use it all the time. I recommend this with clients when they're standing in line at a grocery store, when they're brushing their teeth, when you're at the kitchen sink. Anytime where you're going to be standing for a period, just take that opportunity to get inventory and feel where you're at. You're going to feel better for it, I promise. Okay, now let's start with our warm-up. So for the warm-up, we're going to do some marching. We're going to start low and we're going to build to high. The reason why I want to integrate marching into the warm-up after postural setup, it's going to require you to hold all these connecting points we just discussed in play to maintain your balance and maintain control. Okay, so here's what I mean. First thing we're going to do is we're actually going to go feet together. It's going to make it a little easier for you at first. And we're going to place your hands on your hips so we reduce any extra noise, any involvement of other things. So from there, keep the bowl where it should be and bring up one foot just a little. This is our low march position. Notice my toes are not pointed down, they're flexed upward. So I'm using muscles right here in the shin. And as an aside, one of the greatest reasons that people fall is catching their foot. So if you're always intentional about lifting your toe with exercises like this march, you're strengthening this muscle and thus reducing your fall risk. So let's keep that in play. At that low march, I'm holding position, I'm feeling for the tripod on my left foot, and I'm coming down. Now I'm going to go on the other side, leading with the toes toward the knee, that low march position, feeling for the tripod on the right, and coming down. Very common if you're having trouble with balance to start arching your back and spilling water all over the place. So keep your connection as you're moving through this action. Now we're just going to pick up the pace. So you notice how I'm sticking the landing every single time. I don't want to rush and fall out of balance and call that a rep. I want each one to be pristine. Okay? Intentional practice is going to make the difference, not just practice. So we're going to continue. And now you should start feeling your body temperature rising. And as it relates to your body temperature rising, we're now going to make your knees rise a little higher as well. So now we're going to go into kind of a midpoint march. Keeping that control. I'm putting my fingers here. You notice I have my middle finger and, what do I have? I have my thumbs and my middle finger. That's what I usually use. It's giving me reference to my hips and ribs, because if I'm spilling the water, they're going to spread. So I want to keep that connection as I'm moving. Now let's finish with a high march. Following that, very good. So we're going to our highest point. We're sticking that landing. You'll notice too, I'm starting to put my feet a little bit wider now. So that's causing me to have a little more of a weight shift. And that's very good for balance and awareness, to have that weight shift. Another common reason people fall is because they don't have this confidence when their stance width changes. So let's explore that a little bit. Notice I'm going even wider, and I still have that control all the while. So find your limits and challenge yourself to expand them. Very good. I'm feeling warmed up. How about you? Very good. All right, so now our exercise choice for today is the squat. The squat is a great exercise. It's very functional. Functional is a loose term. Ultimately, what it means is you're going to use it a lot in your day-to-day. So the squat starts first with a wider than hip width stance. So you remember when we talked about our standing postural setup, we had the feet lined up with the knees and hips. For the squat, we're actually going to go wider base of support, and instead of the feet pointing right at you, I'm actually going to turn them out slightly on either side, but I don't want the knees to stay here. I want them to follow me out, and that motion is coming from the hips. So you're kind of rotating these bones like so. When you feel that, when you do that, you're going to get a nice connection in the buttocks. You'll feel a little engagement. That's a good thing. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to take our hands and we want to imagine that we're pushing ourselves back with our hands. Okay? So if I put my hands here, I'm going to push myself back. If I push myself back here, there's no reason why I'm going to round my upper back, right? Because all the motion is going to come from my hips. I'll show you from the side. You'll see what I mean. So, no need to go here. My hips didn't move at all. If I push back with my hands on my hips, the back stays nice and aligned. That's the posture we want on the squat. That's the posture we want in life. Anytime you're rounding your back, that's not a good thing, especially if you go to pick something up. So we're going to push those hips back, get them nice and straight. And then what I want you to do is take your hands, put them to the insides of either knee. Make sure your weight is bearing largely on your heels. And just sit down to your comfortable end range of motion. And then stand back up. And for all intents and purposes, that's a squat. Let's talk about one final piece to your squat. That's your breathing. Okay? So I'm going to go sideways again. We're going to get our stance position. And then what I want to do is I want to inhale as I'm setting up the squat. And then I'm going to exhale as I'm lowering into the squat. Now I'm going to inhale once again, and I'm going to exhale as I'm standing up. Let me take the sound of my voice out of it so you can hear my breathing. Now, it's not essential that you have that 2-breath cycle that I was showing there, but for a beginner like yourself, I highly recommend it because it helps you to understand how to integrate your breath with your motion. You can always speed things up, but if you start slowly like I just showed you there, and you take each rep with that kind of intention, that kind of focus, I promise you, your breathing will be better for it, your control will be better for it, and most importantly, you're not going to get dizzy from the exercise. So, for now, that's where we're going to leave it on the squat. The last thing that I promised you was we were going to talk about something motivational to finish you today. Like to consider, you're going into your day now, you invested this time with me. What's a motivational way to finish this session? Well, I want to bring it back to what we started to talk about. We talked about that postural setup. We integrated it into movement. Today it was the march and different ways to approach the march. And then we brought it full speed into the squat. So think about how all 3 of those come together in such a way that as you gain mastery by coming back and hanging with me, you're going to be empowered. You're going to have a confidence that you may be struggling with finding right now. So consider how each day, how simply you can integrate these movements that I showed you today into your already pre-existing day, and how confident you're going to become with that practice, that intentional practice I talked about earlier in our session today. So that's what I want you to consider as we're leaving today. How can I put this all into practice? And how excited am I going to be as I realize that I'm now an empowered human being that's excited to experience all that life has in store for me. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, my name is Chris Litton, personal trainer from Tucson, Arizona, and I look forward to our next session together. Bye-bye.